What if I told you that someone earning $150,000 a year could actually be worse off financially than someone earning $60,000 a year? That sounds impossible, right? More income should always mean more wealth. But if you've ever looked at a doctor, a lawyer, a senior manager, or a successful salesperson, someone who is clearly excellent at their job, earning a salary most people would consider a dream, and yet somehow still living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in credit card debt, or panicking about an unexpected expense, then you've already witnessed this paradox firsthand. High performers are often incredible at their careers and terrible at building wealth. And today we're going to break down exactly why that happens, because understanding this trap is the first step to avoiding it. Stay until the end, because the final piece of this puzzle is the one that actually changes behavior, not just understanding. Let's start with the most obvious and most misunderstood reason this happens: lifestyle inflation. When someone starts earning a high income, especially after years of studying, working overtime, or climbing a competitive career ladder, there's an almost automatic psychological reward that kicks in. They think, I worked incredibly hard for this level of income. I deserve to enjoy it. And on the surface, that feels completely reasonable. Nobody wants to grind through years of medical school or years of corporate ladder climbing just to keep living exactly the same modest lifestyle they had as a broke student or entry-level employee. But here's the trap. As income rises, spending tends to rise right alongside it, almost automatically, often without the person even realizing it's happening. The apartment gets bigger, the car gets nicer, dinners out become more frequent and more expensive, vacations become more luxurious. Individually, none of these decisions feel reckless. Each one feels earned, reasonable, even responsible given the income level. But collectively, they create a situation where someone's expenses grow at almost the exact same rate as their income, meaning the gap between what they earn and what they spend, which is the only thing that actually determines whether wealth gets built, never actually widens. This is exactly why high earners can end up in a strange, uncomfortable position, earning far more than most people around them, while still feeling financially stressed, still living paycheck to paycheck, still one unexpected expense away from panic. Their income grew, but their savings rate didn't. And savings rate, not income, is what actually determines whether wealth accumulates over time. Now let's talk about the second major reason, which is closely tied to the identity that comes with being a high performer. High achievers are often used to a certain narrative about themselves, the idea that hard work and talent directly translate into results. This mindset serves them incredibly well in their careers. Study hard, get better grades, work harder, get promoted, perform well, get recognized. But when this exact same mindset gets applied to wealth building, it often backfires, because building wealth doesn't actually reward hustle and effort in the same direct way that career advancement does. Many high performers, unconsciously, apply their career mindset to their finances. They believe that because they're smart, hardworking, and successful in their profession, they'll naturally be good at managing and growing their money too, without needing to actually study personal finance the way they studied their profession. This overconfidence often leads to two dangerous outcomes. Either they neglect their finances entirely, assuming their high income alone will eventually sort things out, or they jump into complex investment strategies they don't fully understand, assuming their general intelligence and success in other areas will translate automatically into investing success. Both of these paths tend to lead to the same disappointing result: wealth that never quite materializes despite an impressive income. The third reason is something psychologists call time poverty, and it's incredibly common among high performers specifically. Building a high-income career, whether that's medicine, law, corporate leadership, or high-level sales, typically requires enormous time and energy investment. Long hours, constant travel, high-stress decision-making, and demanding schedules leave very little mental bandwidth left over for something like personal financial planning. So even high performers who genuinely want to build wealth, who understand intellectually that they should be budgeting, investing, and planning, often simply don't have the time or mental energy left at the end of an exhausting day to actually sit down and do it. Financial planning gets pushed to someday, and someday has a frustrating habit of never actually arriving. This time, poverty also leads to another subtle but significant problem: outsourcing financial decisions without proper oversight. Busy high earners often hire financial advisors, which isn't necessarily a bad decision on its own. But without understanding the basics themselves, they can't properly evaluate whether the advice they're receiving is actually good for their situation, or whether it's primarily good for the advisor's commission structure. This creates a dangerous blind spot where a high performer might be paying excessive fees, holding poorly structured investments, or missing tax optimization opportunities, all while assuming everything is being handled correctly simply because they're paying someone else to handle it. The fourth reason is social comparison. And this one is particularly powerful among high-earning professionals specifically, because they tend to socialize within similarly high-earning circles. A doctor surrounded by other doctors, a lawyer surrounded by other lawyers, a corporate executive surrounded by other executives, naturally starts comparing their lifestyle to their peers rather than to the general population. If everyone around you drives a certain type of car, lives in a certain type of neighborhood, and takes a certain type of vacation, it starts to feel not just normal, but almost necessary, even if the actual math of your specific financial situation doesn't support that level of spending as comfortably as it appears to for others in that same circle. This creates a particularly dangerous version of lifestyle inflation because it's driven by comparison rather than genuine need or even genuine desire. High earners often find themselves spending money not because they've thoughtfully decided that particular expense truly improves their life, but simply because it matches the expectations of their professional and social environment. The fifth reason, and this one often surprises people, is that high performers frequently delay wealth building until later because they're deeply focused on career advancement in the present. A young associate at a law firm might think, "I'll focus entirely on making partner right now. And once I make partner, that's when I'll really focus on my finances." A mid-career professional climbing toward an executive position might think similarly. "Once I get that promotion, once my income jumps again, that's when I'll get serious about investing." This constant deferral, always pushing serious financial planning to the next milestone, means that years, sometimes a decade or more, pass by without meaningful wealth accumulation, even while income steadily climbs higher and higher. The problem with this deferral pattern is that it ignores something we've discussed before, and it's worth repeating here because it's so critical. Time is the single most valuable asset when it comes to compounding growth. A high performer who starts investing seriously at 35, even with a large income, has lost 15 years of compounding compared to someone who started at 20, even with a much smaller income. By the time many high performers finally turn their attention to serious wealth building, often triggered by a milestone birthday, a health scare, or simply looking around and realizing their savings don't match their income, they've already lost the most valuable resource in the entire wealth building equation, time itself. There's one more dynamic worth understanding here, because it explains why this pattern can feel so invisible from the inside. High performers are usually excellent at managing perception, both their own and other people's. A doctor or executive who is quietly struggling financially rarely shows it outwardly because their professional identity is built around competence and success. This means the problem often stays hidden, even from close friends, family, and sometimes even from a spouse, until it becomes a genuine crisis. There's a strange kind of loneliness in being outwardly successful while privately anxious about money. And this isolation often prevents people from seeking help or advice early, precisely when it would be most useful and easiest to correct course. This is also why so many high earners are surprised, sometimes years into their career, to discover just how little they've actually accumulated relative to their income. They assumed that because they looked successful and because their bank account never actually hit zero, things were fine. But looking fine on the surface and actually building wealth underneath are two completely different things, and the gap between them can remain invisible for a remarkably long time, right up until a real financial test, a job loss, a market downturn, or a large unexpected expense exposes exactly how thin that financial cushion really was. So, now that we understand why this happens, let's talk about what actually breaks this cycle. Because understanding the problem without a solution just leads to anxiety, not change. The first shift is treating your savings rate, not your income, as your primary financial metric. Instead of measuring success by how much you earn, start measuring it by what percentage of that income you're actually keeping and building wealth with. Someone earning $60,000 who saves 20% is building more long-term wealth than someone earning $150,000 who saves only 5%, purely through the mathematics of percentages and compounding over time. The second shift is automating your wealth building before lifestyle inflation has a chance to claim that money. Every time your income increases, whether through a raise, a bonus, or a promotion, commit to automatically directing a meaningful portion of that increase, ideally at least half, directly into savings or investments before you allow your lifestyle to expand around it. This single habit alone can completely reverse the typical pattern we've been discussing throughout this video. The third shift is separating your professional identity from your financial identity. Being brilliant at your job doesn't automatically make you brilliant at personal finance, and there's absolutely no shame in that. These are simply different skill sets. High performers who accept this and take the time to actually learn the fundamentals of personal finance, even just an hour a week, tend to close this gap remarkably quickly. Precisely because the same discipline and intelligence that made them successful in their career transfers beautifully to finance once they actually apply it there directly. The fourth shift is deliberately auditing your lifestyle against your peer group, rather than unconsciously absorbing it. This doesn't mean abandoning your social circle or refusing to enjoy the fruits of your hard work. It simply means occasionally pausing to ask yourself honestly, am I spending this money because it genuinely improves my life, or because it matches what everyone around me happens to be doing? That single question, asked regularly, can prevent an enormous amount of unnecessary spending driven purely by comparison rather than genuine value. The fifth shift, and perhaps the most important one, is starting now, regardless of what stage you're at in your career. Stop waiting for the next promotion, the next raise, or the next milestone to get serious about your finances. The version of you 5 years from now will either thank you or resent you based on the decision you make today, right now, while you're watching this video. Here's the deeper truth underneath everything we've discussed. Being a high performer at your job and being financially successful are related, but they are not the same thing, and they don't automatically come as a package deal. Wealth isn't built through talent or effort alone. It's built through intention, consistency, and a savings rate that actually keeps pace with, or ideally exceeds, the growth of your income. The good news is that if you're already a high performer in your career, you already possess the discipline, the intelligence, and the work ethic required to close this gap. The only thing missing is applying that same energy directly toward your finances, with the same seriousness you already apply to your profession. If this video helped you recognize a pattern in your own financial life, or in the life of someone you know who earns well but somehow never seems to get ahead, hit that like button, share it with a high-earning friend who needs to hear this, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next video, where we'll break down exactly how to build a simple, sustainable savings system that works even for the busiest, most demanding careers. Because at the end of the day, earning a lot of money and building real wealth are two very different achievements. One requires skill in your profession. The other requires a completely different kind of discipline. One that has nothing to do with your job title and everything to do with the decisions you make with every single paycheck. See you in the next video. Until then, look at your savings rate, not just your salary.